Thank you. This is Peter Isikoff, Chair of the Greensboro Minimum Housing Commission. We're calling this meeting to order. The first matter of business is each of the commissioners has received a draft agenda from city staff, and I would entertain any motions on adopting the agenda.
This is Carolyn, and I move that we adopt the agenda as sent to us.
I second. This is Andrew Young. I second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and second. We'll do a roll call vote since it's Zoom.
I apologize, I was muted. Commissioner Brown?
Which one? Oh, me. Aye.
Commissioner Biggerstaff?
Yes.
Commissioner Waddell?
I'm here.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Chair Isikoff?
Yes.
Did Commissioner Nazim join?
Just join up.
Okay.
Suzanne, we're voting on adopting the agenda that was emailed out.
Okay, sorry. And I look horrible, so no comments from the peanut gallery, please.
No worries.
I'm fine with the agenda. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So that passes unanimously. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to staff for the training presentation.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can switch over from the agenda. There we go. Does everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So as we move through this presentation, there are three parts to it. I'll handle the first part. Jasmine Pressa will handle the middle part, which is the legal. And is Cindy Blue on here? I don't see her. If she's not here when we get to the rehab part, then I'll cover that portion as well. We estimate the training not to last more than an hour. We're getting it started a little late, but we'll try to make up some time.
Roy, this is Judy. Excuse me for a moment. You're breaking up a little bit whenever you're talking. Maybe you need to speak right into your computer. That might help.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So,
Troy, would you go over the last couple of things you said? I didn't hear it either.
okay, I had said we're going to try to keep the training to 1 hour to respect everyone's time and go through the presentation. I'll handle the first part and legal counsel will handle the second. And if Cynthia Blue is not on here by the time we get to the rehab part, then I'll cover that for the remainder of the training session. All right, so if you have any questions or something along the way, if you'd like to maybe make a note of it so that if we don't engage in too much discussion through it, we might can get through it all and then maybe talk about some things there at the end as we wrap up, if that's okay with the commissioners.
Thank you.
That sounds great.
All right, so in the overview, what we're going to cover is the role of the Housing Commission, the code compliance housing enforcement process, vacant housing receivership pilot initiative, the rehabilitation program, eligibility and timelines, the quasi-judicial standards and code of conduct, and then any questions and answers at the end. So the role of the Housing Commission. The purpose of the commission is listed in the handbook for boards and commissions that is adopted by the city council. So it says to study the rental rates, the need for reconditioning and condemnation, and other housing conditions within the city. Decides on matters appealed from rules of the building inspector, which these are your code inspectors, and the chief building inspector and the fire inspector, concerning the housing code, and inspects houses and living quarters in the city, having the right to enter with the building inspector for that purpose. In addition, for receivership, this is an additional duty that's not yet been added to the handbook, but has been adopted by council, and that is to file petitions with the Guilford County Superior Court in compliance with this statute in 168 439.1, vacant building receivership, to utilize the services of the city attorney or employ independent attorneys or law firms to file such petitions as selected by the city attorney. And we'll talk about this later. There's a slide on receivership, but this is an additional duty that has been delegated from the council's powers to the commission. Decisions of the commission are subject to review by Superior Court of Guilford County by proceeding in the nature of certiorari instituted within 15 days of the decision by the commission. So what that means is any decision that the commission makes, if a person that has standing, if they still feel aggrieved by the decision, then their appeal goes to Superior Court. The housing enforcement process. For inspections and violations, the current edition of the International Property Maintenance Code is the 2018 edition. The city ordinance for the minimum housing code adopts automatically the current edition of the IPMC. This code is updated every 3 years, so we expect another update in 2021. And it will require no additional adoption. That's the way the ordinance is written. So once the IPMC year comes out, that will be the new edition that we will have to enforce as the minimum code. Inspections are conducted on the interior and exterior of the building. The inspector does a complete assessment, beginning on the outside and then on the inside, to have a conversation with the owner about any deficiencies that they find. There's two types of violations. You have major violations and you have minor. The difference between the two is the major violations are your life, health, and safety violations, in which can harm an occupant or threaten the health of an occupant. You may be the structure's integrity from a storm, no power, no potable water, unsafe electrical wiring, fuse boxes being overloaded by the power, anything that can risk fire. Those are what you're looking at for your major violations. It is for the determination of the inspector to articulate that major condition. All other violations of the housing code are deemed to be minor. When the inspector looks at the minor, more than 5 minor violations or 1 major, gives them the opportunity to open an enforcement action. If they get a complaint and they do their investigation, if they do not have 6 or more housing violations that are minor, they're not permitted to open a housing case. Instead, what we do is we counsel with the owner, help to educate them on the deficiencies found, and provide them with any resources available, such as the rehab program. However, we do not have the authority to take an enforcement action by city ordinance. A major violation, if it is a residential structure, then the inspector will go ahead and take an action for a 48-hour notice to correct the violation or for the occupant to remove themselves from the structure that protects their safety. If it is a non-residential structure, all major violations are directed to the chief building inspector as directed in the good repair ordinance. The good repair ordinance adopted this past year by the city council is the non-residential code for the minimum standard of maintenance. And when you do look in Chapter 11's housing code, the good repair ordinance adopts all codes in the IPMC as its minimum standard for non-residential structures, except those codes that are specifically listed in 11-57. So when the inspectors assess a non-residential building, like a commercial building or a building that does not contain a dwelling, or if it's a multi-use building, a level that does not contain a dwelling, then you would assess the non-residential parts of the IPMC and then go check the code sections of 11-57 and subtract them. We do not have the authority to enforce any section of the IPMC code on a non-residential building that is listed in 11-57. The standards are adopted by City Council. So how a case begins, the way they're reported to us is through the website. A person can submit, give their name and email address. We receive.
What do you need for that?
Our staff receives a form, and that PDF form is attached to the case document. The call center is able to enter complaints that our admin staff creates cases from. You also have direct reporting. Anyone can call the 373-2111 line. Anyone can approach an inspector in the field or in the office if it's a direct referral and refer a complaint to us, and the inspector can enter it, or the inspector can send it to the administrative staff. We also receive public agency referrals and public officer referrals. These come from the fire inspector, these come from police, field ops, any other department or officer charged with enforcing a city ordinance or city standard. A lot of our referrals do come from fire and police. And also you have a petition, you have an option, the petitions issued by a citizen, 5 citizens, to inspect a housing structure. Now, if it's coming from a public official, it only has to be one. One city official can initiate an inspection. Now, the petition only applies to residential complaints. A petition does not apply to the non-residential good repair ordinance. So there is a form for this that the citizen can submit, and we have used those. If the inspector receives the petition, then they will go to the property. If they cannot get consent, they will pull an administrative inspection warrant and inspect the property for the conditions listed in the petition. So there's a note here that an inspector investigating a nuisance or a vehicle complaint on the property or next door to a property can open a housing case with obvious or unsafe conditions of the housing code. So we are complaint driven, meaning that the inspectors do not patrol around looking for violations. There's enough violations reported by the public, on average approximately 125 a week. So there's enough work to do. But if an inspector is in a community and they see blatant obvious violations next door, across the street, that should be obvious to them, and they have some sort of health and safety hazard to them, they are allowed to take an action, and they should. Housing case management. We have split our housing cases into manageable sections, which are 4 levels. So a level 1 housing case is the initial complaint. That is the initial fact finding. Is there even a violation? And the issuance of the order to repair or to demolish. So the inspector goes, investigates, meets with the homeowner, does their assessment, determines violations, and then they prepare a notice and they meet with the homeowner in person for that hearing, and then they issue an order to repair. One of the things that we're going to be changing are adding to this process is at that meeting of the issuance of the order to repair, the inspector is going to provide them with the resource pamphlets for the rehab and lead program, as well as an application to apply to the rehab program. We want to start doing an assessment of all housing properties that are coming through co-compliance, through rehab, to see if they qualify. They will not need a lead evaluation if the structure was not built prior to 1978. Level 2 housing. Now, once the order to repair is issued, it moves the case into level 2. So a level 2 housing is what we call the performance period. That time has a maximum time for the inspector of 90 days. Upon the expiration of that order to repair, which the order to repair expires after 30 days, the inspector is allowed to issue 2 30-day extensions if the owner is making an effort to comply. The inspector can make an extension if they have submitted an application to rehab. They can provide an extension if the owner is making compliance, or if the inspector feels that that an extension is necessary. In good faith, it's completely up to the inspector. They have a 90-day period to attempt to gain compliance. Once the 90-day period is over with, there's some options, and this is a newer process that we're going to be working on. The leadership team is already working on this themselves because it's on the supervisor level. After 90 days, the inspector is going to prepare the paperwork that is normally provided to the commission. Their fact sheet, their violation list, their cost estimate, as well as their case notes. And they'll go ahead and submit a title search, the title search request if they haven't already. They'll send that to the supervisor. The supervisors are going to be evaluating the case as to whether or not rehab has anything active, and if 3 situations exist for rehab, then we're going to hold the case because the city ordinance allows extensions without the director's approval for housing cases in which an application has been submitted to rehab, housing cases in which rehab has approved an application, and housing cases in which they have approved and they're awaiting construction. If any housing case fits any of those 3 categories, then the case is not to be forwarded to the commission. It is to be held and monitored, and we'll be monitoring it monthly. And one of the benefits that this serves is, as long as if the case is not yet forwarded to the Housing Commission, then that means the inspector has not issued a civil penalty. The inspector has not began to assess reinspection fees, and the inspector has not condemned the structure. So if the case is under review for the rehab program, which we're setting deadline standards for those reviews, then the supervisors will hold on to those cases themselves. The third opportunity for an extension will be the director's extension. If a property owner, and a director's extension is only considered if the owner makes a written request. That's how it is listed in the ordinance. So the owner, the inspector can reach out to the owner and say, hey, you didn't get approved for the rehab program. You're close to gaining compliance, or you have really achieved a lot. Would you like to submit a director's extension? And if they do that, they will tell them to write out a plan. What is your plan? Do you need 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days to achieve your plan toward compliance? That is submitted to the director. Stanley Wilson would review it. If he feels and it appears that the owner can gain compliance within the time period that's being requested, then the director is authorized to issue an extension. He'll designate what that deadline date is, and the inspector will monitor that compliance through that time period. And by the time the end date arrives, if they're in compliance, then the case will close with compliance. If they're not in compliance, but they're close, they can ask the director to reevaluate it again. If they stop complying, or there is no more effort to comply, and they're not in the they have not been accepted for the rehab program, or they've not met the conditions to satisfy their acceptance, then the case will be prepared and forwarded to Tony Jones, that will place it on the agenda of the next meeting, which would be the next in-person or virtual. We'll go through that process at that time. And it's then that the property will have to be condemned, the civil penalty issued, and a month later, reinspection fees would begin to accrue. Now, this process here, I've looked at it and reviewed it, and we've put it in place from the feedback that we've gotten from the commission on hearing cases litigated and discussed. And we believe that this is an effort, or that what the commission would prefer in its feedback, that try to get rehab involved early, try to get as much assistance provided to them early in the process, and see what we can do to help them. So we're doing those with the current cases that currently sit with the commission, but this is a process going forward with all of our new cases that we're going to begin to process. So once a case is referred to the Housing Commission, it becomes a level 3 housing case. In the level 3 cases, all cases with the commission are accruing civil penalties. They accrue a reinspection fee. The reinspection fee is a safety inspection for the public of the structure. It's not an inspection merely that the homeowner called the inspector to the property for advice or assistance. And it's not an inspection that the inspector is preparing for a hearing of the Housing Commission. Reinspection fees cannot be applied for those last 2 scenarios. The safety inspection must be on a different day. And what the safety inspection includes is the inspector has checked the structure to be sure that it is secured, windows and doors, that it is vacant, that no one is living in it or habitating it, that it is also posted condemnation warning at the front door and the rear door of the structure. All 3 are required by the ordinance. So the inspectors are taking a photo and they're updating a case note of that inspection. The level 3 requires a single inspection every 30 days. So when the and that's where your reinspection fees apply. Once referral is made to the commission, the first month of that referral is a free safety inspection. There is no reinspection fee. That's the first inspection. Even though the inspector has probably been to this property 20 times already working with the owner, only after condemnation does the safety inspections apply. So, and it accrues at the rate of $150 for the first, $300 for the second, $400 for the third, and it continues at $400 per 30 days after that. The inspectors have a sheet that they have to check their level 3 inspections that the supervisors provide them. Level 4, once the commission makes a decision to uphold the inspector, to reverse the inspector, or to, if the case is withdrawn for compliance, those are the ways the cases come off the commission's agenda. So once a case is upheld, it becomes a level 4 housing case. As a level 4 housing case, the monthly inspection, safety inspection, goes to 90 days. At this time, reinspection fees are not applying to level 4 cases. That was a policy adopted by the department prior to my employment, and that's not yet been reviewed. The city ordinance appears to reflect that the reinspection fees for the safety inspection shall or should continue until compliance. And I'm not certain of the reasoning, but I would guess that the reasoning is if an investor wants to come in and rehabilitate a property, that they are not being assessed reinspection fees. However, for safety and for the safety of the structure and the public, we are re-inspecting these structures every 90 days and not assessing a fee. Now, the receivership initiative that we're going to also discuss, the demolition structures as well as the repair structures are eligible for receivership only after 90 days has expired, after the commission has upheld a decision. So once those 90 days expire, then they're eligible for the receivership initiative that we will discuss. In the Housing Services Division, you have what's known as the Lead Safe Housing Program, the Homeowners Rehabilitation Program, the Rental Rehabilitation Program, and there's a newer program that we're working on, which will be for a focus toward investors. So here's what the phases look like. Shows you from complaint to the issuance of the order, the monitoring until the property is condemned. And I explained there's a whole lot of stuff that we've added in here to assist the homeowner with compliance, to assist them with financial needs. If they qualify, if they're pre-1978, if they need lead abated, then this phase right here is where we're going to try to get every property assessed and try to get them all the financial assistance that they're qualified for. And try to get this structure into compliance so we can avoid condemnation, which would lead to the displacement of a family. If we can rehabilitate the property while the family is in the structure safely, that is the goal, rather than immediately issuing condemnation, displacing the family, and then letting it sit through the phase 3 and 4. So phase 3, the case is now has been referred to the Housing Commission for review. And this is a due process set in our process because the Housing Commission's review of the inspector's case, their evidence, and their decision is important because you can reverse that. If you find that the inspector, in fact, has not made a good decision, that the violations that they're showing are not violations of the code, you can take that action right here and provide relief to the property owner. You can continue to make extensions. You can provide extensions to the property owner. The ordinance does not limit your authority on any extensions. You can extend for as long as you wish. Upon the decision of an upheld case, it would move to phase 4, in which after 90 days, the city can utilize funding to demolish the structure or to repair the structure. And if we do that, we can demolish under a different order, a different appropriation of funds by city council, or enter the property into receivership, or if it's after this initiative of rehab, enter the property into rehab, the rehabilitation program. I won't belabor these points. This is, I will send you at the end of this call, I'll send everybody a copy of this PowerPoint so that you'll have it by reference. But I believe I've discussed all these individually. I probably should have went screen by screen. But these just lays out some of the conditions of the complaint, the time of an inspection. Now, right now, because of the volume of cases, we're not able to comply with this number of days. So we make our best effort and we prioritize the cases based on life, health, and safety. The notice of hearings issued, the inspector hearing. So this kind of gives you what the timeline would look like, that were our goals that we're aiming toward in our policy. This is what a level 2 looks like, up to 90 days. the first reinspection, the second and the third, and then the director's extension, and then the condemnation, issuance of the penalty, and the Housing Commission referral for level 2. Level 3, the referral packet, and we've moved this back to the start of level 2. But the referral packet, re-inspections, videos that we do prior to the Housing Commission, so that you can see all efforts made by the homeowner, and the preparations of the inspector. So when the inspector visits the property, what they're doing now is that every Housing Commission, well, this is a new procedure, at every Housing Commission, the inspector is visiting the property with a copy of their violations in hand or on their tablet. They have a discussion with the property owner or the property manager as to what they've done to remedy those violations. They inspect the structure with the owner, and they try to correct as many violations as they can to mark off the list, because at the beginning we try to give let the violation serve as a punch list for the owner to work toward in gaining compliance. So they do each one of these things. Then they video the structure. They'll make their case note in the system of their inspection and any improvements made, any action plans, or what the owner says they can accomplish next. And then in preparation for the meeting, the inspector completes the fact sheet again, updating only the information that's new. They reprint the case notes that will have their new inspections, their comments from their interaction with the owner. They reprint their violation sheet, which all of these have dates on them so you can tell when they get reprinted. And they also update the calculated worksheet. So if 2 violations were corrected and they go to the calculated worksheet and 2 things can be marked off, then they will mark it off and they will check it again. And on their fact sheet, if the improvements that the property owner has made now causes the cost estimate to be less than 50%, then they will change their initial request for demolition to an order to repair. So we have put those conditions in place to be evaluated and reprinted 2 weeks prior to your housing hearing. Now, being that the 2 weeks prior, one of the things that I would want to share with y'all and let you know is that if you provide an extension of 30 days, say we're in the month of October, and you give an extension to November, our process that we have to go through, meeting with each of the homeowners and updating these forms, is now a 2-week process. So after the last meeting, after your October meeting, the homeowner will have 2 weeks to do what they can toward compliance before the inspector is going to have to start their preparation process, or is going to have submitted their preparation for the November meeting, which is due 2 weeks prior. So they're going to be working the second week after, more than likely, meeting with homeowners. So if you're able to provide 60-day or more extensions, then that will be, I think, more beneficial to the homeowner, but that is all completely up to your discretion. We will put in the work, put in the inspections, and make sure the file is updated for your review so that you have the most complete, accurate information when you make your decision to uphold any decision, any action of the inspector. And you have level 4, which we discussed earlier. So let's talk about the Receivership Pilot Initiative. The program description, it was created to preserve and increase the city's housing stock, to improve the appearance of neighborhoods by improving or removing blighted properties and increase the availability of affordable housing. Currently, there are 139 upheld demolition orders by the commission and 68 upheld orders for repair by the commission. Code compliance will identify in this program 20 properties based on an analysis of property condition and value, their owner status, the areas of interest or high visibility, and identified property clusters. These will all go into a scoring value that will help us prioritize any of those properties. Code compliance will identify and select qualified entities to be recommended to the courts as receivers through a request for qualifications competitive process. That RFQ is being developed now, and we are anticipating releasing it or issuing it on November the 3rd with a go date of January the 1st with qualified receivers ready to be appointed to any of the properties that we identify. The program process, so code compliance would complete an investigation or an inspection. The Minimum Housing Standards Commission would render an upheld decision. Assignment and appointment of a receiver would happen by the court. Now the second and the third step here is something that we'll need to communicate with the commission and figure out what the commission's preference is. The script for the commission, when you make an upheld decision, this is the script the chairman reads. That script can be updated to reflect your decision that particular case, or that every demolition or order to repair case in which you adopt an ordinance to uphold the inspector's decision is eligible for the receivership program, and the code compliance division is given authority to petition the court for a receiver. We can put that wording automatically into the script. Otherwise, what would happen is any cases that's currently on the list, we would be delaying the process by scheduling the case, having to get consent if we're still virtual, to bring the case back before the commission to make a formal request. Can we pursue a receiver for this case in the Superior Court? There would be nothing for us to present to you except simply to make the ask, because we cannot petition the appointment of a receiver without the expressed consent of the Housing Commission. So that will be something that I'd like for y'all to consider and think about. And then at your next meeting, you can share, or at the end of this one, you can share what you think your preference would be, because myself and legal counsel will have to come up with what that wording would look like. So just to reiterate, that part is that the receivership program adopted by City Council we cannot use it to petition a qualified receiver by the courts unless the Housing Commission directs the Code Compliance Division to do so. And once that's done, then we'll follow the remainder of that process, present a property and then the next qualified receiver on the rotation to a Superior Court judge and ask them to appoint them as a receiver.
Hey, Troy.
Yes.
How does a person become a receiver?
Huh?
How does a person become a receiver?
Currently there's a request for qualifications, like an RFP that is being created. It's going to be, it's in MWBE's review right now. Well, it's getting ready to go. I'm sorry, it's sitting right here on my desk. It will be submitted and released on November the 3rd, which we will send it out to all the contractors that have requested to be notified now. All contractors that we are aware of. We've been in contact with the Greensboro Business League. All the addresses and contacts that MWBE provides us and placement on our website. So any sources where we can find or get in front of general contractors, private businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses, we're going to send this RFQ to them. They apply to the RFQ, and then there's a matrix scoring system that already has certain scores for their qualifications, and once they're qualified, then they are issued an award acceptance, and they come onto a rotating list, just as our nuisance abatement contractors are now. Our nuisance abatement contractors that are on a rotation, when the next job comes in, it goes to the next contractor on that rotation list, so that it's balanced among the rotation. That would happen in this same manner. The next contractor available on the list would have an identified property. The contractor would prepare a plan of action to remedy the violations as listed in the upheld decision. And then we would present their qualification packet that they submit in this RFQ. We would submit that qualification packet as well as their plan of action on the property to a Superior Court judge and ask for that judge to appoint this qualified receiver to the property. The judge is not obligated to choose our recommendation. The judge can put whoever they want to. They can, if it's a partnership on property, they can assign the other partner. If it's a property owned by a husband and wife, they can assign it to one of them. The statute lists people eligible to be appointed by a receiver. So the judge can choose what's called a non-qualified receiver that does not meet the qualifications of the statute, or the judge can choose a qualified receiver. Now, if the judge chooses any receiver, whether it's our recommendation or whether the judge chooses a non-qualified receiver or any other receiver, and they're not performing, if they're not making progress, because we will monitor it each 30 days and continue our case notes, but if they're not performing, then we will reapproach the Housing Commission. We will give the Housing Commission a report. We will report any non-performing that we're finding or that we're seeing, and then we will ask the Housing Commission to direct us to either one, continue monitoring and keep the commission updated on the next month or whenever, or we will ask the Housing Commission for the authority to petition the court to change the receiver by removing the receiver and suggesting again our qualified receiver or another qualified receiver.
Now, here's a question. You said that there already is there's already people who have applied to be a receiver. And I'll be quite candid with you. I've actually been waiting to see and looking to see how this receivership program was going to start. How in the world were they able to find out the qualifications? Because they're not posted or listed anywhere. Or am I wrong? Are they posted or listed somewhere?
Yeah, you've not. Let's see. Let me back. Somebody's trying to get it. All right. So no, no one has applied. So what has happened is the news article where the city council approved the receivership program sparked interest in contractors that have contacted our office. And what we started doing is we started compiling an Excel list of those persons or businesses that have contacted us that says, hey, when y'all issue the RFQ, I would like to be invited to participate. So on that list, on that Excel list, there's approximately 6 contractors that have called us. A lot of people have called since that news article, but I do not know their qualifications. They do not know what the qualifications are because the RFQ has not yet been released. The only knowledge they could have would be from the news article or their own independent research of the general statute. The qualifications in the RFQ follow strictly the general statute, because when we submit that information to the judge, we're going to submit their financial information, their certifications, their licenses, their knowledge and experience, because the statute says that the person or entity must have knowledge and experience to do the job. They must have the financial ability and capabilities to perform the job and complete it. And I think those are the main points. Those are listed in like 4 points. So the RFQ is developed around the statute to identify qualified receivers. And it is designed in a way not to eliminate or restrict or hinder any business or person to apply. We want receivers that have the knowledge, experience, builders, nonprofits. There's a nonprofit that has expressed an interest, and this expression came a while back. A person from the Housing Coalition, they heard talk about a receivership, and are like, if this ever comes to fruition, we want to be a part of it. So we're just making notes right now.
The reason why I ask is we put that in the verbiage for when we're voting, but we don't know what the RFQ is, or what the receivership or what the receivers or qualified receivers are. We could be, in essence, for all practical purposes, taking minority-owned properties that are in distress and basically giving them to non-minorities or majority ownership. And that's why I'm wondering, like, I guess we need to see who the receivers are, because I can be quite candid with you. What is the minority rate of the nuisance abatement contractors that you have on file currently?
Well, currently there are none.
Okay,
the contracts are expired.
With on nuisance, boarding up stuff is not going to any of the minority companies that are in the city, which I'm sure would love to be able to have that opportunity. So before we put wording and verbiage together and legal counsel and them kind of push that towards a judge, which most of the time will side with what the council or commission goes with, we need to know who and what these individuals are, and we need to know the level of diversity in what we're doing. We need to know that. Okay. I think maybe someone on the commission else can weigh in.
Now, the process would not be, it would not be where the commission would be choosing the receiver. That's not written in the process. Instead, what's the way the RFQ is written is that the initial award notification for the qualified receivers during the initial process, they will be placed in an alphabetical order by the business name, by the first business of their name, or the first person's name, if the business is the name, or if it's just the entity. Now, we have written the RFQ so that is not limiting only to those that want to take a chance in participating in the program in the beginning. We hope that it gains an interest by other people. We hope that it gains an interest in MWBE businesses to join or want to be a receiver. So in the first phase, after when the initial award notification is granted, those businesses are placed in the alphabetical order as they are with the nuisance rotation. That is the conditions that have been adopted or approved, not adopted, approved by the MWBE department here from the city. Now, after the initial award notification, I had written a clause into it, and it has to be first approved by MWBE. And that clause leaves open enrollment. And in an open enrollment, that basically allows any future business or company to submit the same information. There's a scoring mechanism to score 60 points, same as the initial process. If the business contractor or whatever scores the 60 on the matrix scoring system, then they are eligible to enter into a contract with the city to become a qualified receiver. Once that happens, they're placed after the last name of the initial award notification. They're not included. They're not it does not reorganize the alphabetical of the initial award. So that basically after that, you have a first come, first serve, next one on the list. And then as properties are identified, if you have 20 properties and all 20 properties are scored and we have the highest scoring property, which is your highest need property, say you have a property that scores 25 points and then 23, 19, 18, and 10, if 25 points is the highest scoring property, then that property is going to be given to the first contractor on the rotation. The next ranked property would go to the next contractor on rotation, so that it goes like a round robin, one right after the other one. It doesn't pick and choose a contractor that it goes to. Instead, it balances the opportunity. And once it reaches the end of the list, it cycles back up to the first contractor, and it continues through the list in that manner. And the pilot, go ahead.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to make sure that all the listed contractors ain't non-minorities. You see what I'm saying?
Right, and it is certainly the city's manager's direction to the departments is also to ensure that we increase vast majority opportunities to MWB businesses. That is definitely on the front line of what we're looking at and what our goal is.
We look at the nuisance abatement right now. That's what'd you say? There's no minority contractors on there.
No, not none. I'm sorry if you misunderstood me. Right now, all contracts expired on September the 30th. We're waiting on our new contracts to come in from the procurement division, which is managing that process. So right now, I don't have any valid contracts. In the previous process, there's 17 contractors and 5 businesses were MWBE certified contractors. In the new rotation, 15 contractors applied and 15 contractors were awarded to become nuisance contractors in the next 2-year period. 4 of those businesses have been told, or we've been informed by MWBE that they have their certification, and one of those businesses had let theirs expire. So they're trying to get that certification back. And one of the things that I'm working with MWBE trying to do is a lot of our contractors that are on our rotation are minority business owners. So I'm working with Allison Stanton and Gwen in MWBE trying to get them certified through HUB so that the city can get their credit of awarding contracts to MWBE businesses. So when I've spoken with them, they also have shared that they have realized that as well. And that is a function of MWBE, is to help those businesses gain that certification.
Well, one of the why I'm bringing it up again is last year's nuisance abatement basically didn't have hardly any minorities. And when you say MWBE, that doesn't necessarily mean minorities. What it means is minorities or women-owned businesses. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a Black company that owns it. It could very easily be a white company who has a woman CEO, which I understand that the office, that's what they do, but sometimes people can cheat the system by doing that. And that's a whole nother level in itself. But what we don't want to do, what I like to make sure is that when we start putting this wording into our script, is that we're not out here basically giving receiverships to a program that is basically giving away minority-owned houses, that especially being Black houses or Hispanic houses, to white receivers because they can't afford to repair it, and that's important.
Now, one of the things also keep in mind, one of the things you're saying is I'm hearing giving away. Receivership does not take ownership away from anyone. All it does is with a court order by the judge, they're granting control of the property only to the receiver. The receiver doesn't take it and the city doesn't take it. They grant control.
Financial control, right? Like if I had receivership of your house that you live in right now, I theoretically could rent your house out and make money off of it while I'm waiting for you to pay back the cost of my repair that I had to do to your house. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so if you take if you were assigned receivership to my property, and based on the ordinance adopted by the commission, our cost estimate sheet may be $15,000 to repair it. And we know that that's a low number. That's not a market value number. So it's going to be higher. And you invest 19 to 20,000 of your own dollars into my property. When taxes come due, you'll have to pay those taxes for this property. And anything you pay, your fees, your labor, your equipment costs, your attorney fees, anything you pay to help remedy my property of these code violations, you're allowed to place those as a receiver's lien on the property that is not going to fall off. It is going to be ranked second to the initial or to government taxes. It's first after government taxes so that you get your money back. Now, the receiver is allowed to remain in control of the property for 2 years, no more than 2 years after rehabilitation. And during that 2 years, if it is a residential property, the receiver can rent. They can put a tenant in the property and collect rent for that property, in which that rent must go toward the $18,000 to $20,000 that you have invested in your own money. After the 2 years, when the 2-year period is up, the receiver has to report back to the court. They will report their financial collectings of the property, their rent, they'll see their liens, and if they have not yet collected in their rent all monies that they have put into that property, that they have put against it as a lien, if they've not yet collected them, then the judge will see what the balance is to the property owner. So if over a 2-year period you collect rent and you have gotten back 15,000 of the 20 you invested, then you have a balance of $5,000. The owner of that property at that time can pay the $5,000 lien, because the lien, the receiver can foreclose on their lien, but the owner can come up and pay $5,000, pay the lien off, and be done. Or if it's 5,000 or more, then the owner of the property can exchange their deed to the property to the receiver in lieu of the owner having to pay anything, no matter what the amount is.
So at the end of 2 years, if you don't have enough money to be able to pay that, the court could grant the person who is the receiver, the deed to the property. Is that also true?
The court would not grant it in that manner. The receiver would have to file a foreclosure, and it would have to follow a foreclosure process where not only the receiver can be a bidder, but anyone else can also bid.
And that's what I'm saying. So basically, if you can't pay the bill, which some people might not be able to pay, at the end of 2 years, you could lose your house.
The alternative is a dilapidated and deteriorated structure remains in the community that is already growing with blight. That's the alternative.
I understand. And like I said earlier, I want to make sure that poor Black people aren't losing their house because they can't afford to fix it up. And a person who has the means, usually wealthy, can come in and fix the property and say, all right, well, you're going to owe me. And at the end of 2 years, if you can't pay this off, I'm going to foreclose on this and get my money out of it. Most likely I'll get your house.
And that's the benefit, and that's kind of the benefit of a fair process. And that is how the RFQ is designed, so that the property, it's not a hand-picked property. The contractors or qualified receivers are not hand-picking anything. We're gonna do it by score, and we're gonna do it by rotation. And the stars will align for whomever. It gives these contractors, these receivers, those opportunities. And anyone can apply to become a qualified receiver. Any nonprofit, even a person that's not a general contractor, can apply, because the receivership, the RFQ, allows points for them if they're going to employ a general contractor, or if they're going to subcontract a general contractor. And in the receivership itself, I have taken the second option in points. On a matrix, you have the highest point value and you have the second point value. I've taken the second point value in all categories to ensure that a score of 60 is not unreachable. So you have a scoring opportunity of 100 points.
You don't have to be a general contractor to have 60 points. You can be a regular person who just has a really good, strong plan and ability to manage and still get 60 points.
That's correct. Yes, 60 points is actually a lower number. When I take the second option and move through, even with the MWB option or the MWB contractor or use of the bonus points on one of the categories, I come up with 65 points. So the what's being placed in the RFQ is 60. If we go below 60, what you're giving up is experience, knowledge, or the financial capabilities of a person to actually follow through with the receivership.
Okay, got you.
All right. So then we have the rest of the process is monitoring the receiver's progress. And like I said, this is where we will continue to provide updates, whether it is an agenda item that we put as a regular item, just to keep the commission aware of the progress in this new initiative. And if they stop performing, then we're going to try to catch it early and find out why, and bring it to you to get your permission to ask the courts the assignment of a new receiver. If the courts remove our receiver or any other receiver, the next available receiver on rotation is going to be who we recommend. If you recommend to petition the court for a change in receiver, then we will pull the next available contractor that's on rotation to make that recommendation. And then receiver forecloses on the lien or is relieved by the courts. If the receiver has collected all the monies that they invested into the property back, then the courts will relieve the receiver and transition the control back to its property owner. So the program outline: your level 4 housing cases are the only eligible cases for receivership. Housing Commission approves the property for receivership program and authorizes neighborhood development to petition the Superior Court for an approved receiver. The scoring process prioritizes the properties. Qualified contractors prepare a plan of action. The legal request appointment of the approved receiver to Superior Court. So the legal city attorney's office or outside legal counsel, whichever one, will represent the request of the commission to the courts. Receiver begins rehabilitation of the property. The receiver completes rehabilitation of the property, and the court finalizes the process. So once the court appoints a receiver, that receiver is now accountable to the Superior Court judge that appointed them and must make 30 monthly reports to that judge or longer. It all depends what the judge decides. The qualifications of a receiver is the financial ability to complete the purchase or rehabilitation of the property, the knowledge and experience in rehabilitation of vacant property, the ability to obtain the necessary insurance, and the absence of any building code violations on other real property owned by the proposed receiver, any member, principal, officer, major stockholder, parent, subsidiary, predecessor, or other affiliated with the proposed receiver or the receiver's business. That is exactly out of the statute. We did not enter anything else into that paragraph. Now, we believe that this is going to be a challenge, and we will face that challenge when it comes, when we discuss this with counsel and counsel share our stance with the Superior Court judge that an investor that is coming in to address, investors purchase properties from owners that's on the condemnation list in order to rehab them and sell them. So an investor that purchases a property that's vacant might already own a property that has a code violation issued by the city, but maybe this would not apply if they were not directly violating the code, the building code itself. So this is going to be an interpretation challenge for us when we start talking with the Superior Court judge, and we will work with the legal team to put our best foot forward and try to get a receiver appointed if you request one to be appointed. So
Troy, this is Carolyn. I have
yes.
a concern from the very first about receivership. If I hate to see us, and I realize you're saying that you're going to try to get some things changed, but if we are not able to have receivers who have any kind of code violation, then we just cut out some of the major investors who do some of the really good work, because they go in, and buy properties and they're code violations until they get things going.
And that's what we're
I'm
hoping.
really concerned.
And that's what we're hoping the legal team will argue for us, is that by the way the statute is read, is that the absence of building code violations, and when you go in to read the statute in which the builder or these persons have been cited with a building code violation. So this is specifically what the statute says. So we cannot exclude it and we can't change it. And the Superior Court judge has to make a decision based upon it. So we're going to give them as much information about the qualifications of the receiver so the judge can make that decision. But I agree with you. This is one of the hurdles that we are going to have to figure out, how the judge is going to look at it. How do we frame that an investor that purchases, or that investor that, when I say purchase property, we're talking about they purchase other property. They already own dilapidated property that they simply purchase for the purpose of fixing it up and putting it back on the market, or whatever their goal is. Can that person or that business be a qualified receiver? So that's the challenge for the legal team, and for us to try to discuss that with the judge, and legal counsel can, Ms. Pressa can chime in if there's anything to add, or if there's any point that I'm missing. But those are conversations that's generally had with the judge to argue whether it exists or whether it does not exist.
Well, I would make one suggestion just to consider, Jasmine and you, Troy, when you're doing this. If there's a way to look at the history of the people that are applying for the receivership, such as how fast have they taken care of former code violations, how serious are they? If there's just a way to do that, then you would know pretty much if you had somebody who would do the right thing with the property.
Right.
If you can, as long as we can't change this, because this has bothered me from the very first. I mean, I was so delighted when the state did what they did with the receivership, but this is the thing that could keep us from having some of the folks that both that have been very successful here, and some of the folks we'd like to attract to Greensboro from surrounding areas. So just wanted to throw that out. And I don't want to take any more time up from the training, but thanks. Thanks for all you're doing with this. This could be really important and get some of our neighborhoods in much better shape.
Right.
So I think you accurately covered it. It would be basically an argument that obviously they wouldn't have any current outstanding code violations, but that is an issue with, investors taking on, properties that weren't in good condition at the time of the purchase. And that's just an argument that'll be made in court.
Well, and also as a former landlord way a long time ago, one of my histories, part of my history, you can, I was always fortunate with wonderful tenants, but you can have, as we all know, tenants that for whatever reason will choose to, you know, call in code violations. And I just think if we could get the overall history, besides exactly what's going on right at the moment, we could get some really wonderful folks to be involved. So thanks again for all you're doing for that. That can be a big step for us.
But definitely, Troy, I was listening to what Carolyn was saying. I have to chime in, and hopefully Andrew will back me up on it. What we don't want to do, and what the commission doesn't want to do, is basically make it a receivership program of majority wealthy investors who have enough money who don't live in these areas, that have enough money to rehab these properties. And like I said, in 2 years, end up owning them, or are displacing individuals who are poor or minority owned. Like, what we don't want to do is do that at all. I mean, I definitely agree with Carolyn on having some of the big investors, but you know, we don't want to sell whole neighborhoods or sides of a city to another side. And I think that's important because, I mean, let's be candid. As we're sitting here talking about, the type of people that have the money to put that in there are not the average individuals working on the side, working every day or doing what else. Most of the people to put money in $20,000 and $30,000 into a property are going to want their money back. That's logical. They're not just giving it away. And it's something that we need to be looking into as a commission, that we create a very fair and even and level playing field, so that there is no sides or races that have a majority or ability to be one up by whatever. I mean, even if a receiver was able to get a loan from a bank, it's been shown that banks have been less than fair to minorities. That's quite obvious. If not, I mean, there's a lot of articles that have been written on that. Recently, the Harvard Times or the Harvard Business Review talked about how banks and other places have basically segregated against minority owners, which in essence starts a domino effect to allow opportunity. But we don't want to just have, this is what this is an opportunity. A, it helps the city get properties back up and running. B, it helps be able to, sorry, somebody called me. B, it helps us to be able to also create opportunity in building and such. But we want to make sure that it's a very fair and even playing field so that the rich get richer.
I understand your point, and if you want to take more time to think about it, and like Troy said, he's going to provide everybody with a copy of the slideshow. Perhaps we could decide, you know, whether the language is included in the ordinance and what that may look like at the next meeting.
And we'll pull something together as staff on what that could look like, so that y'all can let us know if you want that to come into your standard. Because otherwise, if you're upholding decisions and only moving certain cases, making certain cases eligible, then now we're going to have decisions that have been scored, decisions that have not been scored, and it's going to become a complicated process to where now properties are being chosen, or neighborhoods are being chosen to participate in receivership or not participate in receivership. And that could be problemsome for our accountability on our side, but we'll do whatever the commission wishes to do. I shared my screen. Are you able to see the statute on my screen? Is that what you see? All right.
Yeah, the language is the same.
I highlighted the section here, and the reason I was saying that we would be working with the legal team to make this argument for us is, if you notice exactly what the statute says, is the absence of any building code violation issued by the city on any real property owned by the person. So when I read this, if an investor purchases a property and the property already has code violations, then that investor was not issued a violation notice by the city, meaning they're not a contributor to the violation unless, of course, they purchase it and never fix it. And at that point, we would be issuing something more to them. But this is going to be the part where we're going to work closely with their legal team to see if they can make this argument to the judge if the judge finds that it is an issue. So that is our that's what we anticipate. And so that's how we wish to overcome that. But I wanted to cover this with y'all to make sure you knew that that is a condition in the statute. Therefore, it is listed in the RFQ.
Thank
So
you for that.
Hey,
Troy.
Troy, can I just ask a question here? Just,
Absolutely.
yeah, when it comes to the formal role of the commission, we will pretty much be either okaying the city to move ahead with a petition or not, right? We don't get to make any recommendations as to how the city's going to argue before the court, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And
So-
would we have any ability for the receivership program to say that there's a certain portion of the people investing in the receivership program that have to come from districts 1 and 2?
What was the last part? I heard everything except the last couple words.
To Quentin's point, which I think was a good one about not having, one side of town owning the other side of town, could we say that for this program, a certain percentage of investors coming over to fix things have to be from districts 1 and 2?
So, go ahead, Troy.
I don't know how we would be able to get contractors that would be from a specific district. Because what's happening is in an RFP and RFQ process, any person, entity, or contractor or business or nonprofit is able to apply to the RFQ. And what's going to happen is the way that I've got it set with the transparency of the process, I've removed the subjectivity of the contractor, meaning that you could look at the RFQ, look at the scoring, and see based upon the qualifications as to what you're going to score. You're going to see that ahead of time. So when you submit all of your documents and everything, you should already know yourself whether or not you're going to score a 60, 65, 70 or more.
Could we add a criteria that district 1 or 2 investors get extra points on their score?
All right. So are you asking that if the investor is residing?
Correct.
Or if their business is located?
Correct. If it's a business investor, business located, according to the Secretary of State filings, private investor based on their residence.
All right. So let me ask this question. There are points in the system that give it's a local preference policy. And it grants 5 points, which is businesses that are here in Greensboro, Guilford County, or they have invested like a dollar figure, I think like 500,000 or more. Let me make sure I don't quote myself. An eligible, local preference policy is all bidders that have significant business presence for at least 1 year within the corporate limits of the municipality, which comprise the Guilford County Economic Development Alliance, High Point, Guilford County local area, are eligible bidders pursuant to this policy. A bidder has significant business presence in the local area if it is headquartered in the local area for at least 1 year, or it has at least 25% of its total full-time, part-time, and contract employees regularly based in the local area for at least 1 year, or bidders at least 500,000 in gross sales in the local area within the 12 months preceding the city's advertisement for bids to the general contractors for that specific contract. If they qualify there, the local preference policy grants a score of 5 points, and they must complete the certification form for that.
And I guess what if we had similar language for an additional 5 points if the same criteria apply to districts 1 and 2? And Quentin, I'd be interested in hearing your input on this. Basically saying if you're from districts 1 and 2, we're going to give you a preference to invest in your own community.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with Peter on this one. I'll be quite candid with Troy and them. You know, I'm gonna be honest in a couple different levels. So on the upper level, you want to have the most certified individuals, right? So you want to have that. Now we're gonna look at it from a macro view. The most of the people that you just described on there don't own businesses or don't have the ability to have that level of scrutiny with their income, who are small business owners. And a lot of them, I can almost tell you, there's probably hardly any general contractors out here now that are minority owned. And when I mean by minority, I'm not talking about white women owned. I'm talking about Black owned or Hispanic owned. That's what we consider, that's where I'm at, that would be able to have some of the criteria that where it is. So it's like in our wording, we need to be able to make that opportunity more open. We shouldn't have but so many points for what I consider certificate points, because you'd be amazed at how many companies don't have the finances to quote unquote have a certificate. We would like to have it that way, but there's a lot of big companies that don't have a certain level of certificates. So if we make the verbiage so difficult to achieve it that only the super wealthy or the well financed can afford it, then we're going to start to see a trickle effect, almost like a funneling that is only going to certain areas. And I definitely agree with Peter that, you know, people, if you're in a district, I feel like there should be a high level of points to say, hey, I would like to take on this project because I live in this area and this is in my community, 100%. And I think if you do that and you open it up to people who have the ability or people who want to give it a try, I think you're going to have a much more diverse group of applicants, as opposed to, you know, some applicants that are what I call certificate or credentialed out. They just don't have the credential, and they're not going to be able to get it.
So to that point, and what Commissioner Brown is saying,
Commissioner Young, we can't hear you.
Can you hear us?
Are not a huge amount, but a bunch more points to living in districts 1 and 2, whatever the language might be, significant business presence, whatever the language is used, just adding more points.
Or an alternative to get the same conclusion, what if we said the requirements that are laid out currently, the capital and all that requirements, apply to everyone within the city of Greensboro outside of districts 1 and 2, and there are relaxed requirements for districts 1 and 2, with the idea of if you live in the community, you might not have as much resources as other people, but you have the buy-in with this being your community, so we'll give you a little bit more leeway in terms of the criteria for qualifying for this program.
I agree with Peter on that one. That's a good way to put that, Peter. I really appreciate how you put that.
All right, now at the same time, I'm trying to wrap my head around with my note here, because I'll take this back and figure out if we can do it when we're looking at a RFQ process, because one of the things of distinguishment is all the properties that have been upheld by the commission are not just in 2 districts. So if you gave a point value to a business that was from a district in which that district contained more than a percentage of the upheld decisions, I was trying to figure out how all 5 districts would have an opportunity, because if there is a condition that only favors district 1 and 2, then what about the ones for district 3, 4, and 5? And if you make the percentage so great, how does that off balance?
What if we,
So we'll have to also run it, we'll also have to run it by the business practices to see, to make sure that it doesn't hurt anyone.
what if we said, if you reside in or do substantial business in the same language that we have currently, if you reside or do business in the district where the property is located, you get extra points in this algorithm, this schematic.
But we'll never know. We will never know which property. That's the key, is that in the RFQ, in the request for qualification process, we're putting a request out there to identify receivers and understand what this process does, or what we're doing is we're kind of doing the work up front for the court system.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have to have qualified receivers. All we have to do is the commission say, hey, this case is eligible for receiver. We asked Jasmine, will you go to Superior Court judge and ask to assign a receiver to this property? If we have no plan and we have no recommended receivers or nothing qualified, then the courts are not, this is not new to them. They assign receivers to bankruptcy properties, to foreclosed properties. It's just the person of assignment that's like a trustee to make sure that the property is in compliance with the law or whatever condition that judge sets. So this is just a process to identify qualified receivers. And once they're qualified, it doesn't delay the process. So we already have a pool that will go in an established rotation to create undoubtedly no favoritism in the rotation.
What if, and I get the criteria of trying to be fair to everyone, and I also get Quentin's point of you don't want one side of town buying the other side of town. What if we said there were a 2-tier application? If you only want to be eligible for bids in your district, here's the requirements. If you want to be eligible for bids in any property within city limits, then that's the higher requirements that we have currently. So some business owners could apply and say, I only want to invest in District 1, and they meet lower monetary requirements.
What I'm hearing is maybe instead of qualifications that cover all 5 districts, it's localized, right? Per district, say.
An incentive to be localized by district.
The way we do all the RFP, it has to be uniform. We could create a process that encourages the most minority, the most women-owned participation. I do understand that, sometimes majority contractors use their wives as the face to overcome that obstacle. I do realize that is an issue, but the way that we apply it, it has to be a uniform process. And I think that the way that it's been outlined achieves that goal. Even with the selection of the businesses, the receivers, they would be rotated. What we don't want, because it's also been an issue in the city in the past, is me as the department. I know I have a good relationship with this contractor. I'm going to pick this contractor to go to do this project because I know the contractor can get the job done, which is a valid reason for wanting to send that person out there, but it's not giving someone else, maybe the small minority business owner who just hasn't had the opportunity, a chance to come in and do that. So we put a program in place and we just rotate it. We don't like to because then arguments can be made by different contractors that they're not receiving, an opportunity to fairly participate.
Has this process been minimally focus group tested with prospective firms, individuals, businesses that might be interested? Has any of this stuff been not just placed before them to get their feedback, but at least walk through to see just from an actual how it might play out as we try to anticipate this or that, and as Commissioner Brown was saying, not just make this a big opportunity for well-to-do, well-established businesses to jump in. Has this been in any way run through in kind of a live testing?
Sorry, so the live testing is in this pilot. So the city council is provided with the program guidance and executive summary that they approved for a pilot initiative. And
So a
during the
pilot, excuse me, but a pilot means it's going to be tested, and then it's going to be reviewed to see if it works or not?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess that as long as everyone understands fully that this is going to be
I think you froze again.
I think it's cutting out there.
to whether it's truly working, whether all the business is just basically going to some very, very well-to-do folks, and so on and so on. Is that really clear in the language and in the process?
All right, you broke out. I might not have gotten everything that you said.
Sorry, can you just say exactly what the process of a pilot versus a approved program is?
Well, the pilot program allows us to follow through with to do the program that the city council approved. And the qualifications part is based upon the general statute. Now, in a pilot means that it's not a full-blown program at this time. We need to see what works, what don't work, what can we make changes to make it, and to see whether or not it needs to be a program. What do we shape? That's what the pilot initiative is all about. This is a general statute that the legislatures approved in October of 2018, and no municipality has been willing to try it. But if you go through with the housing commission, when you uphold a decision to demolish or a decision to uphold, there's nothing else to do.
Mhm.
You know, like when I came here in June 1st, the house just sits on the list, and it just sits there until tax dollars are appropriated to fix them themselves. So the receivership seemed to be the most attractive solution to help create affordable, safe, affordable housing in the neighborhoods where the neighborhoods are wanting these blighted structures repaired.
Yeah, I think I understand I think we all understand the problem. I just want to be clear. Is there a formal review process when it comes to a pilot?
It'll be reviewed by the neighborhood development department. Yes.
Is that a structured thing? Does it happen after 3 months, 6 months, or after a certain amount of cases go through? Is there a certain criteria, or?
It will be after 20 cases. The pilot has 20 cases.
Got it.
Here's what I would say on that short little change we just had. If it takes 5 years, 10 years to get it right, then that's how long it takes. But I don't feel like we should rush or be worried about, I don't think we should rush any type of the process. This right here is the beginning parts. And, Troy had a good point. Once we vote on it, that's it. And I've been a strong proponent of that's the case, then we need to keep it going. We need to make sure that people aren't losing. For some people, this is all their family has. You got to look at it from those standpoints. Now, granted, it's not in the greatest state, and I understand that. But I don't feel just because something's not in the greatest state that you should lose it. And there, right here, this program that we're talking about right now has the ability to massively change the wealth standard in the city because of what I consider aesthetics. And that's really what we're talking about here. We got to make sure, I understand how we vote, but this is kind of what we spoke about last year to some of the commissioners who were on the board, that our vote really does matter, because he had a good point. Like, once we're done with it. I mean, theoretically, the courts could do what they want to with it. So maybe it's in our best interest to maybe not always uphold. Sometimes we got to look past the move to maybe 5 or 6 moves down the way and just wait till the taxpayers can either A, repair it, or B, demolish it in some shape, form, or fashion. Because like I said earlier, if you're not careful, one side of town will own another side of town. That has happened. And many of these receivership programs have had issues like what we're talking about right now. It's going on right now in New York, and it happened in Miami a couple years ago, about how the black side of town was literally getting bought up by the white side of town because people couldn't afford these vast bills. And it's something that we need to definitely take a high amount to look into.
Quentin, tell me what you think of this. I see this as kind of analogous to a university affirmative action program.
Right.
Which is perfectly valid. I'm actually on my alma mater, University of Virginia's affirmative action section of its website. So you can give preference. We can't have quotas that certain people be of a certain race. But what you can say is the term is underutilized class, which means there is a class of people that their proportion of the population is not adequately represented in a certain, in this case, and in the university student population. What about language like universities put in their rules saying if you are of an underutilized race, that there is some sort of preference for you to come in to this receivership program, similar to if you're an underutilized race, there is a certain preference given to you when applying to university.
100% agree with you, Peter.
Well, if you're an MWBE, if you're a minority or woman, there are additional points assigned for that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking more towards having the same thing for racial identification.
Definitely. I agree with Peter. You definitely are the consummate attorney, and you have the good verbiage. I guess I say it like this, like my uncle said, I can't talk, but I get your point, and I understand what you're saying. Because, I've literally stayed up at night and thought about this receivership program. Once I saw that it cleared, I've read the packet cover to cover. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it's very scary when you sit back and really read what's happening. And I agree with Troy that we need to get, the dilapidated structures up and running, and with Carolyn that, we should have affordable housing for everyone. I just want to make sure that we don't take away, wealth building stations for minorities, especially, because that's really where a lot of this stuff is really going to I think it's going to have an explosion in your first 20 cases. I think a lot of people are going to really start buying up District 1 and District 2. Like, I really believe that. And what I mean by buying up, I think they have the resources to turn it around pretty quickly to get it repaired, especially since the construction industry is booming. And what's going to happen is in 2 years, you're going to see the ownership start changing hands because people just aren't going to be able to pay the bill. And that's a little scary to me. I just don't feel like people should lose something because they fell on hard times.
And Commissioner Brown, one of the things now that since June 1st, when I came in 2019, that I've not seen is I'm not seeing anybody buying up properties off the demolition or repair list. The numbers have stayed constant. We've had a couple investors that have reached out to those property owners and offered to purchase the property and fix it up and sell it, but the numbers are not decreasing in such vast amounts. We're hoping that this.
A lot of people want more than what it's probably worth, and those investors are just like, But this is a way to supersede that. What this receivership program can do is a court will tell you you can get it, and you can just make a bill that a person can't pay, and they can't pay it, and that's what's scary. That's what's kept me up at night. Like, well, I don't really have to negotiate with you what it's worth to you. Now I can just go to the court and just bypass you, and I can put you in a position where if you can't pay what is owed to me, I can then foreclose on your house, get what's owed to me, and most likely get your house because I'll be the one who knows about it and who can bid on it. And that's the part that's kind of scary, that I don't want to see people lose their namesake. Now, I agree with you, though, that, some people don't want to, people don't want to sell their house, no matter what condition, because it is the only wealth building egg that they probably have in their repertoire. And so they're going to try to get as much money out of whatever it is. That's the American way. But what we're doing now is we're using the courts to sidestep. And that's a little dangerous and scary.
Okay. There is more to the presentation for the rest of the training that I'd like to get to. The RFQ is a process. It's at its final process being reviewed by MWBE before we have to make it public, issued for November the 3rd. The part that was listed earlier that was delegated to the Housing Commission is not the selection of the receiver and not the selection of the property, but simply whether or not a property is eligible for receivership, or for the city to solicit the appointment of a receiver. And that's the part where the commission would be asked, can a receivership be appointed to a property? And I guess in the same token, if all properties in a specific district, if the commission does not want those properties to go to receivership, then that's the commission's decisions, as the property is put before the commission. Because what was simply delegated to you by what I've read on the council's order is that the Housing Commission can solicit a receiver from the Superior Court, and those properties are only the housing level 4 cases. So when the request is made, if you want that property to be eligible for receivership, then that would be the commission's wishes and their decision. All right. I see a question. Let me just look at the chat real quick. Commissioner Young had asked a question: does the commission hear non-residential cases? The answer is yes. Commission hears residential and non-residential. Before the good repair ordinance was adopted, the chief building inspector represented those properties. One city official is enough to initiate a complaint. Is a housing commissioner a city official? That would be a question for Jasmine. I think the city official, as listed earlier, is a public officer. So the question to Jasmine: is a commissioner a public officer of the city?
Let me confirm.
Okay. So that question comes from Commissioner Young.
Okay.
And the other question from Commissioner Young: how many hard number of cases receive a director's extension? I don't have that number, and there's not enough cases. I would say since I've been here, I've seen 12 director extensions. And I believe that's all the questions I see in the chat. All right, so in lieu of a receiver, now the court may appoint an owner, a mortgagee, or other party in interest. So in lieu of a receiver, if that person demonstrates an ability to complete rehabilitation or demolition within a reasonable time, agrees to comply with a specified schedule, and post a bond in an amount determined to be sufficient security for performance of the work within the specified schedule. So this is where I was telling you earlier that the court may appoint someone else other than a qualified receiver or utilize these qualifications. Now, the authority of the receiver is this: they contract for necessary labor and supplies for the rehabilitation or demolition. They can borrow money from approved lending institutions or government program using the receiver's lien as security, manage the property and pay operational expenses, including taxes, insurance, utilities, general maintenance, and debt secured by an interest in the property, collect all rents and income from the property used to pay for current operating expenses and repayment of outstanding rehabilitation or demolition expenses, manage the property after rehab with all powers of a landlord for up to 2 years, foreclose on the receiver's lien, or accept a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Now, in the scoring system of these properties, do understand that the receivership only pertains to vacant properties. And the properties are going to score a much higher point for properties in which have basically been abandoned. If there's no owners, there's heirs that want nothing to do with the property, no one's been in contact in the case, those properties are going to score a much higher point and are going to be ranked higher in the receivership system. So you're kind of looking at what I think is going to happen is you're kind of looking at properties that's going to score that are blighted to the communities, that are troubled properties that we're constantly boarding up, or crime is constantly occurring at, that needs to either be demolished or needs to be rehabilitated. I think those are the properties that you're going to see that rises to the forefront, but we've not scored any of them yet. We're still waiting for some other administrative items from staff to be completed before we start that scoring to see where they rank, so we can see what the top 20 properties are going to be. So you're not looking at properties that are in really good condition, that only needs a few things, where you have a more responsive owner that's trying to gain compliance. You're not looking at those properties. Those properties will not score high enough. Frequently asked questions, these in your which will be on the website. These have been put out. What's a receiver? When does a receiver get appointed? I believe we've covered a lot of these in the presentation so far, but I can provide you with the frequently asked questions when I send you a copy of the PowerPoint. Rehabilitation program, eligibility and process. Is Cindy, let me see here. Is Cindy or Sonia? I see James, I see Russ, I don't see Melissa. Okay, all right, so I'll briefly go over these programs. So we have the Homeowner Housing Rehabilitation Program. This works to help low and moderate income homeowners fix their homes. It will take care of all major housing code and structural problems and making your home safe and comfortable for many years. Loans are offered in this particular program. You also have the Rental Housing Improvement Program, in which it offers low interest deferred loans to rehabilitate rental property, 7 units or less. The program provides repairs for purchase or rehab project assistance for 25% of the total redevelopment cost, and rehab project assistance for 50% of the rehab cost. You have the Code Repair Program, which the city offers. This program to help low-income owners complete repairs under code enforcement. Owners must have completed a portion of repairs, and the program will loan up to $15,000 to complete the necessary repairs. You have the Urgent Repair Program. This is an emergency repair, lead hazard control, and rehab program. Lead hazard control partners work to identify and control lead hazards in eligible housing through inspection, risk assessments, contracts for specialized cleaning, lead remediation and abatement, and clearance testing. Our contractors, the Neighborhood Development Department, has an ongoing need for participation by local qualified contractors in the department's housing rehabilitation program. The goal is to improve nearly 20 or more units each year using Community Development Block Grant, home funds, and other funds. So qualifications of participating in rehab programs is that you must be within the city limits. You must have flood insurance if you're in a flood zone. Townhomes and condos are not eligible. All owners have to sign all contracts, loan documents, and application. Only permanent housing structures are eligible. The process, and this process is currently being reviewed and modified. Sonia Randolph is our new housing rehabilitation administrator. The application with all supporting materials, title searches from legal, loan closing, and then construction. It is under eligibility. It is not a grant for rehab. A loan is provided for the amount of the equity in a property up to $60,000. Loan is determined by the income, less than 50% deferred, greater than 50% repayment of a loan. A deferred loan until no longer owner occupied with 0% interest. Repayment loan, the course of 20 years with 3% interest. Title search and credit check, no more than one lien on a property. Judgments counts as a lien and current on their taxes. They can be combined with up to $20,000 in lead and $15,000 in handicapped or ADA compliant. Emergency repair loans is up to $15,000. Cannot be combined with rehab. They can be combined with lead and handicap. No credit check, income intake, title search requirements are the same. All right, now this is for Jasmine.
I'm here. Sorry, I was trying to look up the city official define, but I can look it up later and provide an email to the commission. So just want to give you some quasi-judicial basics. All residents have a constitutional right to an impartial decision maker. And that basically means for the commission, no minimum housing commission member may participate in or vote on a case in a manner that would violate the affected person's constitutional rights to an impartial decision maker. And some of the impermissible violations of due process include a member having a fixed opinion prior to the hearing that is not susceptible to change, undisclosed ex parte communications, a close familial, business, or other associational relationship with an affected person, or a financial interest in the outcome of the matter. And I just want to briefly mention the code of conduct. The city council adopted the revised boards and commissions handbook last April 2019. And basically some of the points from it include the minimum housing commission shall maintain an atmosphere free of discrimination, bias, and bullying. And all minimum housing commission members shall sign the code of conduct agreement. That form was sent out with the agenda. So it's in the last email you received from Troy. If all the commissioners could just sign and date it and give it back to him as soon as possible, that would be much appreciated. As you all know, the city values honesty, respect, integrity, stewardship, fairness, equity, accountability, and independence from undue influence. And we encourage open, constructive feedback to improve programs, effective communication and listening. We ask that you just treat staff, stakeholders, and the public with respect. And so basically I'll talk about a little bit about the appeal process. It's not something that we worry about too often. We don't get very many appeals. This year we had one appeal in January, which was withdrawn after this discovery phase. We keep records of everything, and we provided them with all the information we had regarding the case, and they withdrew the appeal. But an appeal of a notice of violation or other enforcement order stays enforcement of the action And this includes the accumulation of fines during the pendency of the appeal. Okay. So basically, when a decision is appealed, it goes to Superior Court. The court shall allow the record to be supplemented with affidavits, witness testimony, or documents. That's fine, you can go ahead. Troy, your screen.
Yeah, that wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Can you go to the, I think, up 2 slides? The court shall ensure that the commission's findings, inferences, conclusions, and decisions were not in excess of statutory or ordinance authority, including preemption, which preemption just means that you're not allowed to act. Inconsistent with applicable statutory or ordinance procedures, affected by other error of law, unsupported by competent, material, and substantial evidence in view of the entire record, arbitrary or capricious. If the court concludes that an enforcement action was not supported by substantial competent evidence or was otherwise based on an error of law, the court shall reverse the decision. Civil actions for declaratory relief. A person with standing may bring an original civil action seeking declaratory relief, injunctive relief, damages, or other remedies in Superior Court or federal court to challenge the enforceability, validity, or effect of a local regulation. Some of the claims include unconstitutionality, preemption, taking of property. A person must first bring the claim to the board. If the commission makes an adverse ruling, then the court may hear the case de novo. The person has 1 year after written notice of the final decision delivered by personal delivery, email, or first-class mail. The action may be joined with the petition for writ of certiorari. If the court finds that the city violated a statute or case law setting forth unambiguous limits on its authority, the court shall award reasonable attorney's fees and costs to a person who successfully challenged the city's action. Unambiguous means that the limits of authority are not reasonably susceptible to multiple constructions. Again, we don't see these issues very often, but I'm just reminding everyone of the laws related to the commission. You can go to the next slide.
That's the last one.
Oh, okay. Question.
All right, so I tried to call Miss Waddell back. I don't know if she can hear. She was on my speaker for my cell phone. Is she still on? Yeah, I see her there. Can you hear me, Miss Waddell? All right, hold on. Here she is. Can you hear me? You can hear me now? All right, I got you back on speaker for the commission. All right, so are there any questions? I know earlier we've had a lot of discussion on receivership, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this discussion information and sit down with Mr. Wilson, Stanley Wilson, and I'll share this feedback, and I'll double check with MWBE to see what authorities we have as far as our business practices for the RFP and RFQ process, and see what can be done, or if any changes, and we'll make the adjustments as necessary in the process. As I said earlier, it is a pilot, so we want to see if it even works. We want to see if the contractors even want to come forward and put their money into a property that can become a lien. So we'll be monitoring. I will look to see how we're going to do our SWOT analysis, either how our analysis is going to look like, so that I can tell you what actions we're going to measure. And I think that will help Commissioner Young's question earlier on the measurement of the pilot. So I'll go back and look at the program information that was submitted to council and see if I can research what that information is going
Oh,
to
wait, excuse me, you're breaking up again.
So I'll go back and look at that program to see what that matrix analysis is going to look like.
All right, I have one. Oh, go ahead.
That was it.
Oh, no, I was going to ask you. You said that you had 6 entities that specifically indicated an interest in becoming receivers.
Just 6 people that called after the news story ran in the newspaper. They're like, hey, what is this? Tell us more about it. We shared briefly what the program was about. They said, okay, will you put keep our information and let us know when the RFQ is released. And that is not uncommon. When people call like the last 6 months before we advertised for the nuisance abatement process, they said, hey, we want to start mowing for the city again. Can you let us know when y'all start, when y'all open for contracts? So we keep a list, and then we definitely send it to them. We have to solicit to everyone that MWBE sends us to solicit to. Plus, if we want to expand our base of information to get contractors, then we would also include our partners with the Greensboro Business League, as well as any other contract groups, the Greensboro Landlord Association, anywhere to get information out there, because you want to create a large pool of information and eligible persons that can rehab the structure, because in the end, you have blighted, dilapidated, unsafe structures that's sitting in communities where the neighborhood meetings that we've attended, they'll tell us they're hurting. They want these structures remedied. People need a safer, affordable place to live, and that's what we want to put back into the housing stock. And one of the things that it's not in this pilot, but it's certainly something that we can look at, and when we see how the pilot goes, is if we see a change or if we see a disparity that Commissioner Brown and Chairman Asikoff and Commissioner Young has brought out here, if we see something like that happening in just the 20 pilot cases, then there's a change that we can make. One of those changes can be that if we want to change the outcome of a property, then we can take some funding from one of our programs and attach our funding to it in order to help the contractor. But when we attach funding to it, we get the opportunity to set conditions. And in the opportunity of setting those conditions may be that they must make the structure affordable housing, that they must rent it, sell it, or return it to any person in a certain income bracket or a certain percentage of the poverty level, which is where you get affordable housing and Section 8 qualifications. There's conditions that can be attached if we attach funding. But those are all options. What that looks like, I don't know. That's why this is a pilot, for us to explore it, to see whether or not this is a program that is worth the city's investment, and see if it can be successful. So we're going to be monitoring it and measuring it as we go.
Hey, Troy, I know you said earlier that, you've got individuals calling saying, hey, we want you to fix up this structure. The next time somebody calls you, you should tell them, like, hey, why don't you go ahead on and put some money down and we'll work with you to help get this thing going, and let's see how many people call you back. It's easy to make it you ain't paying for it. It's another thing when you ain't got any money and you're trying to fix it. And there's 2 different sides of that coin. You got one coin where people want to see something a certain way, and there's another coin where you got to pay for it. And just like in our business, oftentimes tenants and plumbing want everything until they find out they got to pay for it. Then they're like, I ain't about to do that, but it'll be just fine the way it is. So I only say that to say, that I am 100% for making sure the city looks good and looks great, but I don't want to do it. Or I don't want to be a part of anything that's going to take something from somebody because they're down on their luck or because they're poor. It's easy to beat up on poor people. The court's been doing it forever. So we need to level that playing field 100%. And this receivership program, pilot, whatever you want to call it, you're going to see exactly. I can already tell you, but I don't see why we need to have a pilot to do something that we already know is going to happen. But if that's what the city wants to do, so be it. But all you're going to do is create a lot of bad blood when people start losing their properties. And that's what's going to happen. I don't even want 20 people to lose their houses over individuals who have the ability and finance to be able to pretty much take from it. And like I said, per our conversation earlier, now they don't have to go to the owner. They can just go to the courts and then they can own it. They're sidestepping the people who want to sell it for whatever they think it's worth and being able to just say, well, the court said I could do this, so you got to do that. And that's that. I honestly believe, I can't believe the courts are actually even going to even entertain that.
But I think Jasmine may can speak to the courts because I'm not a court official. But I think the courts use extreme discretionary decisions when they're looking at properties, and of course when they're looking at takings, because they can't just take a property from somebody and move it to another person without some sort of statutory authority. And the receivership does not do that. The receivership only appoints a person to rehab it, fix it, comply with the statute, and then it gives the judge decides to give the property back to the owner, but the owner of the property.
Troy, you're breaking up, but like you said previously, it would create a lien on the property. They don't outright have to give up the property.
Right.
You're right. The judge is not going to say it's your house now. What they're going to say is you owe him this money, and the person just can't afford it. It's kind of what banks did back when they were making these poor loans that they knew were actually known as predatory. The Obama administration and the Attorney General at the time, Eric Holder, launched an investigation and found that the majority of major banks had made poor loans that they knew the individual could not afford. And so basically they were crooked. And I want to make sure that our commission doesn't turn out to be crooked and that the courts don't turn out to be crooked. Because that's really what happened. The banks knew these people couldn't afford it. And slowly but surely, a lot of them were minorities. They started losing their houses because they couldn't deal. They couldn't own it. They couldn't make the payments. And they knew that. And the banks knew that. So that's something that, we got to take a look at. And that's why we're here.
Okay. All right. So thank you all for your feedback and for participating in the annual training. Are there any final questions?
Yeah. Troy, can I just throw in a minute, please?
Yes.
I just want to register a general concern that when folks who have interpreters show up before us, that we are following some sort of procedure that gives the interpreter, whether it's a family member or a professional, the opportunity to fully translate or fully interpret what's going on.
Commissioner Young, hold on just a second, if I may. Legal counsel got cut off, and apparently I had to put Ms. Waddell on hold so I can answer her phone. All right, you said you got cut off. All right, let me see if I can merge your call at the same time with Ms. Waddell, and then both of you will be on speaker. Hold on. All right, Ms. Waddell, can you hear me? All right, Ms. Pressa?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry, I'm having issues with my computer. I guess I have too many things open. I was trying to look up the definition of unit code, and now my computer's crashing. I need to restart it. So I'm on speakerphone now. I'm not in the Zoom call.
All right, so y'all can hear them? Okay, all right, go ahead, Commissioner Young. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'll just repeat very quickly. My general concern is that when residents are coming before us with the use of an interpreter, that we follow some sort of consistent process that allows the interpreter to do his job, whether it's a family member or especially if it's a paid professional. my observation has been that we don't always do that. And as far as I know, the resident who's appearing before us is entitled to hear every single thing that's going on in their native language. Regardless of whether this has any kind of like legal, like things that could be complained about in some judicial hearing thing, I think it just, it's something that we all can be doing a whole lot better to make sure that people walk away informed about what their options are, and, you know, in some cases even happy about the way in which they were treated when they come before us. So I just want to throw that in again, the importance of letting the interpreters do their work, and also us, I would say, checking to make sure that the resident fully understands all the stuff that's being said to them.
Right. And I certainly agree with you. One of the things that I've seen in the observations with the use of an interpreter, and we're going to talk to the interpreters that are contracted, that we have to pay, is that if everyone is talking too much, you know what I mean, like too fast, one right after the other one, that we give the interpreter that time to tell the owner verbatim what was said, because that's the services that we're paying the interpreter for. We want
Yeah, if I could
every
just,
comment.
just one more thing, since you said that the city's paying for some of the interpreters, my observation is that some of the interpreters aren't doing their job. Like, that interpreter has the initiative, they have the power, and this is what they're supposed to be doing as professional interpreters. That's their code of ethics, to interrupt and to make sure that, like, if the interpreter was to signal to anyone in the room, to the chairman, hey, could you slow down, or hey, I need to have that repeated again, or something like that. It pains me to see interpreters who are being paid by the city who are not doing their job, who are saying stuff like, oh, the client gets it. As far as I'm concerned, they're not earning their money. That's, as far as I know, in terms of their code of behavior and stuff, their ethics, they're just collecting pay. They're not really doing their job. So I hope we can help hold them to a higher standard, or if necessary, report back to their bosses, whether it's language resources or somebody else, to say like, hey, they're not really doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay. Thank you for that. I do have that in there. We will make sure that's a much better system. And that is one of the things that when we do have an interpreter, and we'll try to make sure that the interpreter knows that they can ask for someone to give them a moment, so that they can be sure that every single word is interpreted for you all as well as to the homeowner, because they need to hear every word, and then they need to be able to communicate, their response. So I agree with you, Commissioner Young. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, seeing none, that would conclude our training. I will send you the PowerPoint information, and also if you would, if you have the ability to print the code of conduct form and email that to myself or to Christy Holt, we have to group them and get them to the city clerk as soon as we receive them. All right, thank y'all very much, and we'll see you at your next regular meeting.
Thank you, Troy.